The day's arrived. The blue passports have the much vaunted British blue passports have been unveiled by the government, and they symbolise Brexit perfectly, because these passports made by a Franco-Dutch company in Poland, that in itself symbolises Brexit brilliantly. And what do they symbolise? Well, a lot of Brexit supporters on social media are really celebrating this. They're really thinking this as being a major step forward for them, and they're really happy that this has happened. But of course, these people are going to be counted. They're going to earn their place in history. And the reason for that is that they're going to be counted amongst the very, very few people in human existence that have actively celebrated a document that strips rights away from themselves, from their children, and from their grandchildren. Rights that they themselves enjoyed as they grew up in this country, or as they lived in this country for the past 40 plus years. But they're celebrating this as some kind of a major achievement. Now, I'm not sure whether it's the colour. Maybe the colour. For some people, it might be the colour. But then, of course, we could have always had blue passports. Yeah, as full members of the European Union, we could have had full passports. Maybe they believe it symbolises something else. For them, freedom. But it's very difficult to know how they can reconcile their notion of freedom with the active removal of rights and freedoms from people in this country. But whatever it is, I don't know. But apparently this is the big thing, because thus far this is the only achievement that's been made with Brexit. And I think this is probably going to be in real terms, this is probably going to be the biggest and the easiest thing for the government to achieve. So if I was them, I would have held this back, because in the coming months and years, there isn't going to be much else that can be celebrated. I mean, of course they will when they eventually strike a deal with America, they will celebrate that as being a fantastic achievement, regardless of the fact that it will make up for probably a tiny amount of the free trade that we lose with the European Union in the 70 plus free trade agreements and all the mutual recognition agreements, etc., that we had via the European Union. But that doesn't matter. They won't care. They'll celebrate this as being some kind of great trade deal. They'll spin it that way. So yeah, I mean, woohoo, brilliant! Yeah, I'm really stoked about the fact that we'll have blue passports. So when my passport comes up for renewal, I'll be stuck with this document that just is a constant reminder of the fact that rights and opportunities are being stripped away from the British people, and that there are many, many people in this country celebrating that fact. Now, one of the things that is going to happen over the next year that it's occurred to me, and I think this is going to be the case, is going to be the narrative around Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings is, to all intents and purposes, the Prime Minister of this country now. He is the unelected bureaucrat that is running this country, to the extent that he was able to reshuffle the cabinet. In fact, I'm surprised Boris Johnson actually kept his job in Dominic Cummings' reshuffle, but he did, probably because he's a good dead cat, to deflect away from what Dominic Cummings is actually trying to do. But Dominic Cummings was able to get rid of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the number 2 apparently in this country, and he was able to get rid of him so easily. The Conservative Party appeared to falling behind Dominic Cummings. There was no real great outcry about the fact that the separation of our economic governance and what number 10 does, so what number 11 does and what number 10 does, is now effectively merged. So it's a power takeover by number 10, and in particular Dominic Cummings. Because remember, Boris Johnson is essentially lazy. He is fundamentally a lazy person. I mean, and this isn't just me saying this. This has been said by employers right throughout his various careers, from his journalistic days through to politics. He's a fundamentally lazy and entitled individual, but he's more than happy to allow Dominic Cummings to fill the void. And as we progress through the year, Dominic Cummings is going to create more and more of an empire around him. And so what kind of individual is he? Well, I mean, you only need to look at the fact that he employed somebody that supported eugenics. I mean, eugenics, seriously, you know, I mean, this is going right back to the Nazis and before the Nazis, this idea, this notion that has been scientifically and utterly disproven. But it still panders to the very basest, sickest instincts of human beings. This guy was employed by Dominic Cummings in Number 10. And there was an outcry about this, and he had to resign. But to me, that I think that was a litmus test by Dominic Cummings to determine what the public reaction would be to having somebody like this guy in Number 10. If there wasn't a big public outcry, then he would probably employ more and more people with those views. Or, of course, it could be the other way around, where it's a gradual normalisation of people that hold those views being introduced into Number 10 or into the government. Now, if that doesn't scare you, then I would argue that you have no grasp of reality, or you have no grasp of history, of what human beings are capable of doing and what human beings have done in relatively recent history. And so there we have it. We have a guy in called Dominic Cummings that is effectively running this country, running the strategy in Number 10, running the policy areas in Number 10, coordinating the policy areas of Number 10, surrounding himself by politicians who share like-minded attitudes to Dominic Cummings, people like Priti Patel, etc. And this, you know, effectively yes men and women to Dominic Cummings. And Boris Johnson is essentially a yes man to Dominic Cummings. So the story, I think, is going to be that as Dominic Cummings becomes more dominant, I mean, he is arguably extremely dominant in the government now, but as that increases, there's going to be more and more disquiet about this. Because I don't believe that there's many Brexiters that don't see the irony in the fact that they wanted to get rid of unelected bureaucrats. But the way that that's happened is that an unelected bureaucrat has now effectively been installed in charge of this nation. There's no accountability other than to Boris Johnson. For this individual, and I would say that there is no accountability there, because I don't think Boris Johnson wants to get rid of him. Gets rid of Dominic Cummings, it means that Boris Johnson has to do some work, and so as time goes on, I think it's going to be increasingly more difficult for Boris Johnson to get rid of Dominic Cummings. Now, it might happen that he's nominally got rid of, but it's still essentially working in the background at some point. But of course, Cummings won't care about that. It's more about the fact that as long as he keeps the power, as long as he keeps the influence, he won't care whether he's officially a Number 10 advisor or whether he's in an official capacity been sacked, yet is still the Number 10 advisor or the Prime Minister in effect. So I think it's going to become more and more apparent that Dominic Cummings is the Prime Minister of this country, and I think that's going to start eroding at this government. Now, at the moment, because we're at the very start of Brexit, we're at the very beginning of the process. You know, the withdrawal agreement that was basically deciding how we're going to open the door to the House. What we still have to do is decide how we're going to leave. Which route we're going to go on once we've walked out the door, where we're going to go to, how we're going to get there, what we want when we get there. The enormous work is still yet to be done. But of course, it's not going to be done because we need to have if we wanted a free trade agreement with the European Union, this would need to be done by the middle of this year, in order to give the nation states and the various regional parliaments the ability to ratify it. That's right, the European Union is so democratic that even regional states of countries have the ability to veto a free trade agreement if they don't believe it's in their interests. And so in order for that to happen, there needs to be months, and then assuming that it is ratified by the European Union, then it would be put in place in December. Now, that there isn't enough time to do this. It's virtually impossible, and you can already see the arguments that are being put in place by Number 10, that the continuation of the betrayal narrative, the continuation of the narrative that the European Union are bullying the United Kingdom, all of this kind of bollocks that they kind of spout. In order to prepare people for what will probably happen at the end of this year, which is going to be a no deal, or at the very, very least, the loosest free trade agreement that you could possibly have. Now, many people will celebrate that fact. You know, they're excited about the prospect that we'll be fully unshackled, as they see it, from the European Union. But of course, that's because they don't really understand. They don't really understand what that means. It means that we will be left on our own. We might have a few trade agreements that we're able to roll over with various countries, but those trade agreements will be peanuts compared to what the European Union represents. But not just trading with the European Union, trading with other countries that have free trade agreements with the European Union, or mutual recognition agreements, and all the other things that enabled us as part of the European Union to be such a hugely successful economy. So Dominic Cummings is going to increasingly become the story. And I hope and I believe that over time that is going to erode this government's popularity with the 45% of people that voted for it. Remember, it was never a majority of people that voted for this government. Never a majority of people that voted for this government. Far more people voted for other parties than they ever did for the Conservative Party. But the reason the Conservative Party was able to win the general election was because their side of the argument wasn't divided. And the first past the post, because the Remain side of the argument was divided, we essentially lost, even though more people voted for parties, vastly more people voted for parties that advocated a second referendum than people that voted for the Conservative Party. So even the democratic legitimacy of this whole thing is ridiculous now. They will say it's the will of the people. Obviously, they'll say it's the will of the people. I mean, that's an age-old trope that's been used by despotic governments and people throughout history in order to try and bludgeon away opposition. But it is bollocks. It's rubbish. It's not the will of the people. I mean, Brexit. There was never any kind of Brexit that was the will of the people anyway. And I'll go back to the argument that if you'd had a referendum with three options on there, each one carrying equal weight of Remain, leave on WTO, or Theresa May's withdrawal agreement, Remain would have won, and people would have argued that you couldn't have one with WTO and Theresa May's withdrawal agreement because that would have split the leave vote. And then by saying that, by the fact that it would have split the leave vote, proves the fact that there was never any kind of Brexit that was that had majority support amongst the population. So, as I say, Dominic Cummings, this is the story to watch, I believe, over the coming year. We are going to... The betrayal narrative is once again going to be ramped up. I mean, millions of us know this is boring, it's rubbish, but it's going to pander to the nationalists, to the racists, to the bigots, and these are the people that the Conservatives really want to appeal to. And I'm not saying everybody that voted Conservative is a nationalist, racist or bigot. A lot of people voted for Conservative because they didn't want Jeremy Corbyn to be in power, and actually nothing to do with Brexit. But they know that the nationalistic rhetoric is a powerful rhetoric amongst a certain cohort in this country, far more people than I actually realised existed in this country, to our shame. And they will continue to ramp that up, and that will be their way of trying to get everything across the line in December for a no deal. And then once we're in no deal territory, who knows what's going to happen? We are definitely going to be poorer. We're definitely going to suffer. But whilst we're in the transition period, politicians will spout rubbish by saying, look, we've left the European Union, but nothing's changed. Well, nothing's changed because we're in the transition period. But anyway, so Dominic Cummings, watch that story. I think this is where everything could begin to, you could start beginning to see the unravelling. I'm not saying the government's going to fall. They're not going to fall with the majority that they have. But we need to look forward to the 5 years ahead in the next general election. Cheers.